Are you a little perplexed by the bulletin cover today? Okay. I just want to remind everyone, because if you're not old enough you don't know this, blondes have more fun. Today's continuing in the series of my blah sermons, I call them. It started when I wrote a typographical error, and instead of saying Jesus heals the blind man, I wrote Jesus heals the bland man. And last week we talked about healing coming to the blind and to the bland. And this week it is about healing coming to the blonde. You may be surprised about that, but that it is. And this is not going to be a series of blonde jokes. So those of you who are blonde can relax. I'm not going to be making fun of you today. I want to talk about what happens with that. The fact is this. If you are blonde, the chances are extremely good that you have been born into a position of privilege in this world. Let's say that again. If you are blonde, the chances are extremely high that you have been born into a position of privilege in this world, whether you know it or not. Because blonde usually means white, it usually means Northern European, and that, in our world, confers a lot of advantage. The truth is, blondes have more power, and the truth is, blondes need grace because it's a dangerous thing to be privileged. Now let me begin with this question. Why do my son and my daughter, what is it that they have to do almost every time they go out that I never have to do?
Comb their hair.
Comb their hair. Somebody marked down 100 points for Monty. He wins today. And that's temporary for my son, I just want to say, but still. Now, what is it that they have to do every time that I almost never have to do? Put your face on. Yeah, no, it's not that either. Let me tell you what it is. They have to think carefully about where they're going and who will be there when they get there. They have to think about that carefully, and the reason for this is simple. My daughter is female, and in this world, if you are female, you have to be careful about where you go because your rights are not always accepted, and you are always in danger of some kind of attack or assault just because you are female. And my son is gay, and he cannot just walk out and go where he wants to go without thinking about who is going to be there, what's going to be like there. He has to be careful about that in a way that I never do. And that, my friends, is one of the examples of privilege. Now, I'm going to tell you a story from my life. It's one of my favorite stories that I've been through in my life, and some of you have heard it before. And it took place on the streets of Portland, when I lived there in Portland. I was walking down Congress Street. And when I walk on the street, I'm always looking at the people I'm walking past, looking to see maybe I'll have someone I meet that I know or have some kind of a conversation or just to be friendly and give somebody a nice nod or a smile. So that's what I do. And as I'm walking down the street, I see coming towards me, quite a ways down, a woman that you couldn't possibly have missed. She was very tall, for one thing. She was probably, I would say, at least 6 feet tall. Now, she probably had heels on, but maybe not. She might have just been very, very tall. So in one respect, I noticed her because of that. She was also really what we would say she was beautiful. She was striking looking. So when you saw her coming, you would have noticed right away. Third thing is, she was black. And this was some years ago, and honestly, if you were a black person on the streets of Portland, still is true, you'd stick out. You would be noticed. And she was beautifully dressed. She had on a black and gold outfit, and normally I don't notice things like this, so it must have been really spectacular. She had on a black and gold outfit, shiny gold lame, is that what it's called? Just a beautiful outfit. And she's walking down the street towards me as I'm walking towards her. And she has that look on her face that women often have when they're out in public. She's looking straight ahead, she's not making eye contact, and she's doing this because she knows that if she makes eye contact, there's a good chance that whoever it is that sees her is going to hit on her. is going to cause her some kind of trouble, is going to say something to her, and possibly say something to her that is inappropriate and rude. And so she has this look on her face that I have seen on many, many women in society, which is, don't bother me, don't talk to me, leave me alone, I'm just trying to walk down the street. And as she's coming towards me, I'm thinking about this. And I'm thinking about how much more difficult it is for her to go out and walk down Congress Street than it is for me. She has to, first of all, she has to appear better than I do. I can go out and look like I do, and nobody cares, but she can't. Second of all, she knows that she could be assaulted at any point in this process, one way or the other. So she is walking down the street, and I'm thinking about the simple courage that women have to have just to go out and walk down the street. And we are getting closer and closer together as I'm thinking this. And sure enough, just as we get right close together, a car goes by on the street, an old, junky, beat-up, rusty blue car. And a man rolls the window down, sticks his scruffy head out the window, and yells, "You are hot!" Now, she didn't blink. She didn't acknowledge him in any way. But since he yelled that just as we were passing each other, I looked up at her, and it was up, and I looked up at her and I said, "I think he's talking to me." And she did just what you did. She threw her head back and she laughed, and all that hardness, all that reserve just melted away, and for just a moment or two she was just who she was. She was just herself, and she laughed hard. And as I walked on, I thought to myself, I just did something really good. I just gave somebody a really nice little treasure, and I'm hopeful that she might be telling that story about that crazy white man that she met on the streets of Portland, and here's what he said, right? I hope so, anyhow. I'm talking about the fact that I'm not blonde, but I'm privileged, and I am dealing with a life that is just actually easier than hers. And that's the first story I want to tell you. Second story I want to tell you is about this guy named David. And you all went to high school with David, because you know this guy. David was the guy that was good at every sport. He was a three-sport athlete. You know him? Okay? And even the sports he didn't play, he could just pick them up and just kind of do them naturally. He was always good at it. First time he'd go golfing, he'd do fine. You know, that kind of a guy. And he was good looking too, you know, and the girls were all crazy about him. And not only was he good looking, he really annoyed you because he was a nice guy too, you know. Some of the guys that have all going for them, they're jerks, but this guy was a nice guy, so he was very popular. Maybe you got to travel in his circle, you hoped you did, and you also resented those who did get to travel in his circle. He was just good at stuff. And not only that, he was musical. He had his own band. He could play, he could compose, he could sing. He was just at the top of his game all the time. And everything came easy to David. It just came to him. Even one day, and he was the youngest. Where are the spoiled youngest children in the room? Tom? Yeah, okay. Oh, Don. Oh, okay, Don. Okay. So, you know, he just had everything going for him. So much so that one day, this guy named Samuel, a holy man, shows up at their house and says to Samuel, Samuel says to David's father, your son is going to be the next king. He's going to be the next king of Israel. And if you'd have been there at that time, you would have thought, of course he's going to be the next king. Right? He was the captain of the football team, alrighty. He was sings solos in the choir, and he was president of the student council, and he's pretty well off because his father's this big sheep rancher, so he's got all this stuff. He's got it made. And David does become king. You've heard of him, right? King David. And for the most part, David was a good king. But he was in danger all the time, and here's the danger that he was in. Because he was privileged, because things came to him easily, he came to the conclusion that he was entitled to have what he wanted whenever he wanted it. And one day, he's up on the palace, and he looks over and he sees the beautiful woman next door that named Bathsheba, and he decides he wants her, and he summons her and brings her over to the castle. And this is despite the fact that she is married. And not only is she is married to one of the officers of his army who is currently involved in a battle around another city. But David brings this man Uriah's wife, he brings Bathsheba to him. And one thing leads to another, and one thing leads to another, and then she's pregnant. And David has to figure out a way to make it look like it's his child. So he gives orders. This is so despicable, but it's true. He gives orders that the next day when the battle begins, Uriah's division is to be placed in the front of the battle, and when the battle is at its height, the rest of the army is to pull back and leave him there. And Uriah is killed. And David takes Bathsheba for his wife and pretends that that child is his. And that's when you read this story about Nathan. This story about Nathan who went to David and said this. Now here's the thing I want to say about this. David, guess what color hair he had?
It's a blonde.
Yeah, he was a blonde. According to the pictures you find on Google. He was a blonde. He was a blonde like, you know. How many of you think David and Jesus were actually blonde? All right, they were not. They just weren't, okay? They probably didn't. The chances they even had blue eyes is unlikely. So they were not blondes, but we portray them that way because we think, oh, they're so great. They're so wonderful. They must be blonde. Do you see what I'm saying here, the danger that comes with this? There's another story in the Bible about a young man who comes to Jesus, and I don't know if he's blonde, but he's certainly privileged. He's rich. And he comes to Jesus, and he says to Jesus, what do I have to do to get eternal life? You keep talking about it. What do I have to do to get it? And Jesus says to him, you have to obey the commandments. And the man says, I always have done this. I always obey the commandments. And then Jesus says, you only have to do one more thing. What is it? What is it that Jesus tells this rich young man that he has to do? Sell everything you've got. Not some. Sell everything you've got. Give that to the poor. And then come follow me. And what is the man's response? He walks away. He walks away from Jesus. He was invited to go with Jesus, and he walks away. And Jesus says, oh, this is sad. He said, it's hard for a rich man to get into the realm of God. It's harder than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And he could have said rich man, but he could have said, it's hard for the privileged to get into the realm of heaven. And how many of you today are privileged? Yeah. Now, not everybody here is, but most of you are. And I'm saying this to you. Privilege is a spiritual danger because we begin to take things for ours because we think somehow we are entitled to them. And I am saying, you hear me saying we, right? Because I am more privileged than most of you have. Did you read the email I sent out this week? And I listed the 8 ways in which I'm privileged. What are they? 8 ways in which I got a head start in life. A male? What was it? White. Yes. Straight. What else? No, but educated. Yeah. What? Orioles fan. Today, anyhow. Well, you know, there are a lot of ways in which I was. And if I take a look at life and say, all this that came to me, that's mine. I worked for it. That's a spiritually dangerous position to be in. We have to be careful about that because all around us are people in this world who are not privileged. And some of them are sitting right here in this room with us. And we need to keep in mind that fact when we consider what God has done for us. And I want to say this in closing. God's grace comes to the privileged. Just because this young man, he walked away from Jesus because he couldn't give up his privilege, what finally happened to him? We don't know. Here's what I do know. God continued to speak to that young man. God continued to talk to him and work with him, and who knows what he may have done later on in life. And I believe that with all my heart, that God does not reject me because I'm a straight, white, male, Protestant, educated person who grew up middle class. I'm not rejected for that reason, but I got responsibilities that I have to meet. And I fail often at that. And yet, today, I am going to come to this table, and I am going to receive the life of Christ, and I'm going to take that as part of me. And I'm going to walk away from there forgiven. And I'm going to go out today, and I'm going to look around for those opportunities to share my privilege with those who don't have it. And I'm sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing. And when I fail, I will come back here, and I will come to that table again, and I will receive Christ again and be forgiven. Because grace comes to the blonde or the bald or whoever you are. Amen.
You've been listening to a sermon by Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, we invite you to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning, beginning at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to Steve's sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please take a moment to explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day, and that God's blessings will rest upon you now and always. See you next week.